Time, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where in the world you are from. Feel free to put your LinkedIn there if you'd like, or let us know what company you're with, your title, whatever you feel comfortable with. But we'll get started in just one moment. So thank you again for being here. And I'm coming to you from New York City, a little spring-like New York City, or it's not fall-like, I should say, New York City. So happy to be here. Okay. Gosh, we got Krista here. We've got Texas in the house. Amazing. I love it. Okay, so let us jump on in there. So, once again, thank you all if you're just joining us. My name is Rob. I'm the Director of Events and Marketing at Power to Fly, and welcome to our conversation on AI-led recruiting without losing the human touch, co-presented by Talent Collective. So let's jump on in there. Real quickly, just showing our code of conduct here. Lots of legalese on the page, but really to summarize, it just says, don't be a jerk. We want to have a great conversation. And I always like to say that the content shared during Power to Fly's events is for informational purposes only. So feel free to turn on your camera. We want everyone to feel at home here. If you can't turn on your camera, no worries, but feel free to do that. Also, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you are in the world. You can also feel free to add your LinkedIn there. We do want to get to know each other. This is being recorded, so the great thing is you don't have to take notes. We'll be sending out the recording later this week or early next week, so you'll be able to relive this entire event. And if you're watching the recording right now, well, welcome. And last, if you're joining us live, feel free to also add in some questions for our speakers. I know they'd love to hear from you, and I will get to as many of those as possible. This event is eligible for SHRM credits, so I will add this into the chat, but you might want to also take a screenshot of this code right now if you'd like, and we can also send this later also. Just to tell you a little bit about Power to Fly, we help organizations recruit high-performing and inclusive teams with exceptional events, sourcing, campaigns, and expert guidance. We're a 100% woman-led company backed by Morgan Stanley, and we're specifically now digging into helping folks find product engineering talent with AI skills and also reskilling your engineers into AI engineers. So let's meet our amazing panel. First up, we have Krista Tan, co-founder of Talent Collective. Krista has 15 plus years of people operations, talent acquisition, and business strategy experience. And she's also been an amazing partner throughout many of events here. So thank you for being here, Krista. Next up, ooh, let's see. Next up, we have Stephanie Kara Jordan. Stephanie is a talent acquisition expert who specializes in full cycle recruitment for sales and GTM roles. She supported high growth tech startups in the US, Europe, and Asia. Thank you for being here, Stephanie. And last but certainly not least, we have Katie Finn, Director of Talent Acquisition at Dow Jones. She has 20 years of experience driving recruitment strategy across top-tier media and entertainment companies. Currently the Director of Talent Acquisition at Dow Jones, Katie partners closely with executive leadership to attract and retain top talent in journalism, data, business intelligence, and digital innovation. So Krista, Stephanie, and Katie, thank you all so much for being here. And let's jump on into our questions that we have for you. So first up, really want to know what are the most effective uses of AI in recruiting today? Because I think there's a lot of false information out there. We host a lot of job fairs here at Power to Fly, and I can tell you probably the question we get more often than anything else isn't like, how can I make my resume pop? It's is my resume being seen by a real person?
Yeah.
I tell it, I get it all the time. So a lot of people out there think no people are looking at resumes anymore. It's all just through AI. So whoever wants to answer this first, what are the most effective uses of AI in recruiting today? And maybe what are some of the myths out there that we need to tackle?
I'd love to jump in. Okay, do you like to
Sure.
go?
No, no,
Okay.
no, go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay, yeah. For me, it is using AI to kind of cut down on what I call the busy work, um, note taking, automating tasks, a lot of writing, and yes, to a point, doing the resume review. And like you mentioned, that is like the biggest concern we see from candidates out here in the field. I actually was job seeking for most of the summer, and so I was sort of split between the recruiting world and the job seeker world. And it is something we're just having conversations with people, and they're just like, "Is AI using me, using, to screen out my resume?" And I say, well, no, but now we see companies who have these sort of AI tools that help them assist to do resume review. We all know it's an assistant, but candidates are now like, being a little more concerned because they think that again, it's, the bot. But I do think that these tools can be very helpful when used correctly. For me, it's using it so basically do like a keyword search. If I'm in an app in an ATS, I'm just doing a keyword search and find a candidate. So it's cutting down on creating the Boolean. And I've also worked with companies that have had tools. My last company had JobVite, which has a candidate matcher. Which I always read resumes, even if I have a tool like that, like stack ranking, because it just isn't imperfect. And I think that's the thing people need to realize with AI. It's a great tool when it's used, but it's also imperfect. So again, for me, it's kind of battling those myths on the candidate side, but also again on our side, I do think it can be used just incredible ways to just really sort of streamline workflows and processes in that sense.
I love that. Katie, how about you?
Yeah, that's the question I'm getting a lot as well as an AI tool reading my resume. Um, and look, I can't speak for the entirety of the US job market or the global job market. I can tell you a Dow Jones answer to that question is no. If a human being is looking at your at your resume. Generally speaking, I do a lot of networking and sessions with Krista's organization, Talent Collective, and on my own. And the general consensus that I hear from TA leaders is that the answer is no. Like AI tools are not necessarily screening out your resume. I was at a session with one of the premier consulting firms. I won't say which one, and their head of TA was on the phone, and she said her mantra is, "We don't want a machine making a decision for us." And I think and that's certainly the case with me as a TA leader, and I think across the board. What I will say is there are tools. And Stephanie, sort of mentioned it, and when she was speaking, there are tools that have been in existence for years. When I was, quite frankly, at my former employer, there was one called HireScore, where based on keywords, your resume is getting ranked and sent to a recruiter. But that technology's been around for years. It's almost the same as if you put something into Google. If you're looking for a restaurant or piece of furniture, there's an algorithm to what's getting sent back. So that tool is in existence. It has been in existence. That's not a new thing. So generally speaking, no. And a lot of, again, since I get from a lot of companies is that they don't want an AI tool like vetting out your resume. If they are using AI, it's just expediting that keyword search function that again has already been in existence. So in that regard, nothing has too greatly shifted in that regard, even though I think, yes, optically it feels like it. From an AI perspective, yeah, I would say I would really go off what Stephanie just said briefly is that yes, the tools that we're using right now, I mean, I could really deep dive and I will probably further, but a lot of it in day to day is just like the writing elements, doing write-ups. We do record our interviews. I have been beta testing a recording tool that we're using for executive search for our interviews. And I said to my boss actually just last week that we need to start to look at ways to roll out this tool to the rest of the team because the amount of time I'm saving not doing write-ups on executive
Hmm.
search candidate is quite frankly literally hours. Like when I've told you I've sat at this very desk on a Friday night until 8 o'clock finishing write-ups for executive search, and like that tool has completely removed that. So that's been a big help.
I love that. And I also makes me think we can focus more, right? If we're not worried about taking notes maybe in the moment and can
Yeah.
rely on that AI, we can give that person we're interviewing our full attention. So it actually is beneficial to them there. And Katie and Stephanie, you both mentioned some tools. Krista, are there any tools specifically that you are using or love to hear from anyone else on the panel?
Yeah, I could go into a few. One thing I would love to elaborate on, Robin, your comment about job seekers always asking that one question: is my resume even getting viewed by human eyes? It wasn't even getting viewed by human eyes before AI. Like, so the way I think about it, let's just say, because the problem we're seeing right now is, one job rec, let's say 1,000 applications come in. So I want to use that as an example. Pre-AI, the recruiter could maybe get to 100 of those candidates, right? Just physically being able to review them all. Let's say 50% of those or more weren't even qualified at all for the role, right? So then the recruiter is deciding, okay, out of that other 50, how many am I actually going to interview? Now with AI, what's happening is the AI can screen those 1,000 and give you the best 100.
Hmm.
So then the recruiter is really truly has a better pool to choose from and a more qualified pool to choose from. So that's one thing I'd love to say is, even pre-AI, I just think recruiting is broken in a lot of ways because of just the system on both the hiring side and on the job seeker side. So my hope is truly that AI will help us really get to better talent and faster for roles and hopefully speed up the hiring process because that's always, a challenge with organizations and with candidates. What are some of the other tools? Yeah, the note taking that Katie said is a huge one, saving a ton of time there. One other, I think, very controversial tool are the AI interviewers, right? So it's not a
Mm.
human in the interview with you; it's a bot. I'm seeing those at least right now more so used in very high volume industries like
Yeah.
retail, high volume and high turnover. So retail environments, I don't know, I'm going to say Gap, but a retail environment, I'm not saying they actually use this, but where they have to hire, thousands and thousands of maybe seasonal employees, or even in the hospitality industries, manufacturing, things of that nature. I haven't seen many companies more in like a corporate professional environment start to use those, but I think it's coming,
Mhm.
honestly. I don't know when and where, and hopefully the technology just continues to get better and better. Like Stephanie said, I think it's imperfect right now, as with any new technology. But I do think that that's coming down the pipeline, and I think there's very controversial. Some people are for it, some people aren't. The companies that I've talked to that actually have these tools are saying the adoption rate is actually really high with candidates, right? Because there's always this fear of the company implementing it, like, will a candidate even want to accept this interview if it's not a human on the other end, right? But I think that, so far it's sounding like there's high adoption rates, and it seems like it's working for companies that, again, are high volume and high turnover.
Yeah, just to jump in there, we're actually recommending a lot to the talent in our community that they should be using those kind of tools to prepare for interviews. So whether regardless of whether they're speaking to a person or not, they could use those tools to have a sense of what kind of questions would be asked in an interview. So I think that's actually accounting for the very high acceptance rate from kind of the talent community. They are actually probably more familiar with it than actual recruiters, maybe at this point. But love to throw this out to Katie and Stephanie before we move to the next question. Any other tools that you really want to highlight?
No, I mean, the note-taking tool, I would say this is going to sound so obvious, but when I log on to my work in the morning, I bring up my work email, I bring up my calendar, I bring up our ATS, and then I bring up a Chat GPT window, and that's open all day for me, and I use it for all kinds of things. So, and that's just baseline. And I have a free account. I'm not paying money for it. But I would say just ChatGPT as a tool is just so it's really wild. It's incredible. I'll just share this. just to give you a sense of like, and not just helping to maybe write like not all my emails, but sometimes I'm writing an email chat GPT, I'll just and you just say, hey, can you polish this or can you soften this? But I am in the process of launching an executive search function at my company, and I need to build out like a very formalized executive search tracker. And I was thinking about it, and across the board, one of our goals this year for TAs is more active pipelining. And like we have all these trackers, I'm sure you all do, right? Like so I said to someone this morning, I was like, there are more trackers at this company than there are pigeons in Manhattan. We have all these trackers with all this data, but after a search is over, like the data sits there. So how do you convert these trackers into pipeline tools? So I asked ChatGPT, can a code be put it onto a Google Excel sheet that would send out automated email reminders to recruiters to follow up with people? And the answer is yes. And the bottom line is, with the help of ChatGPT, I want to be clear, I have no technology background. With Google, with the Google Apps function, with ChatGPT's help again, I wrote code. So now our spreadsheets will send out automated emails to the recruiter that people are assigned to that you need to send a follow-up email or hey, you have follow-up scheduled with this person for tomorrow. And the email, I was able to code it that when it's sent, whatever's in the column, either a resume or a LinkedIn profile. Because if it's someone you didn't speak to for a few months, you might be like, who am I following up with? But the information is attached. And I did that sitting at this very desk with the spreadsheet up and just talking to GPT. So anyway, all and that's all free. Again, I didn't pay like I didn't have I didn't pay any money for that. So to answer your question, sorry, this became very much longer. I would just say ChatGPT is just at a baseline level such a useful tool, not just for writing, but really just for innovating and just sitting and thinking like, hey, can I do this? And the answer, yeah, you can. Okay, and then off I went.
Oh no, I totally agree. And Stephanie, I'm actually curious what your thoughts are on this other kind of question related to all these tools, because all these tools are great, but of course we do know that AI can have its own bias in
Yeah.
it, right? Of course,
Mhm.
ChatGPT, we've kind of probably all seen a bias there. Now, that's not to say a recruiter themselves might have their own bias that
Right.
exists, but what are some of the ways that we can be aware of the biases in some of these AI tools and do our best to counteract them or avoid them?
Well, I mean, honestly, the one thing I talk about people AI, because I know there's a lot of people who don't trust AI, and I always say it's only as good as the prompt and the input and the person who's using it. So if someone's going to use AI to do something wrong or unethical, it's them. But I mean, honestly, I think it also maybe sounds obvious is check your work. Um, but like going back to like resume review, like I mentioned, if I'm using like I have a tool that's going to help me with screening, I will still go back and look at other resumes because a lot of times it's going off of things like the keywords and it can and will miss certain things, especially if someone's not using different phrasing and terminology. So I will go back into a second set of eyes. When it comes to writing, this is the one where I am actually pretty big on because I've used ChatGPT to write messaging. In LinkedIn right now, they have a solution that will actually help you write messages to candidates and templates. And I still will make my own templates, but edit it. I do a lot of editing through ChatGPT, through other tools, Grammarly as well. I think it's not blindly trusting the tool to do everything for you. You have to be able to pay attention and use it to like user voice, but also really, again, it sounds like it's even on these tools like this thing is imperfect. It can make mistakes, so make sure you're checking for the mistakes. So I would say yes, there's bias, but it's the human bias that I think is the bigger issue, and making sure that you as a human are not letting your biases kind of come through using it through the AI tools is probably where I'm landing at that. And also going back to the screening portion, I think that is actually the portion that I'm still a little on the fence about, though I'm glad to hear, especially with high volume hiring, people are trusting and fine with it. Because I do think in some of the more strategic, roles, that's where I'm hearing a lot of people having a lot of distrust with it. And I do think you have to make sure you're not being impersonal. Um, and there's also, again, going the bias there. Well, anybody can answer whatever question the way that they can make it feel like they're answering the right question. So there's, again, you have to go back and do a deeper dive. And that's something I think candidates are sort of getting hip to. They know that well, if I answer a specific way, I'm going to move forward in the process. Like I've seen
Hmm.
this with things like using Greenhouse, where but I've used companies that using Greenhouse and we have the knockout questions, which are based off of yes and no answers. And candidates will answer yes to a question, even if they don't have that experience, because they know that, okay, it'll move them forward. Or they may say they have X, Y, and Z experience, even though they don't, because they know that they're not going to weed it out. You can also see the same thing with these AI tools. And so it is, I think, a lot of intentionality is important, being very intentional how you use the tool, and also just being very, very aware of the biases going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. My husband's a middle school teacher, so I know sometimes I hear about how kids, can game
Yeah.
AI tools there, and I think it could be the same for candidates. And we're always saying to talent when they're applying, don't lie, be truthful, because you're only ultimately wasting your time and the
Exactly.
recruiter's time. But I do think this will become probably a bigger issue as AI becomes further integrated into the recruitment process and candidates become more wise to that. And I love what some folks are also saying in the chat. Laura was saying, has anyone ever fed a transcript into ChatGPT and asked for feedback on their interview skills? So that's kind of the reverse of what we were talking about for the candidate. So I also love that you can use there as well. Love to throw this out also to the team, and we've kind of touched on this already, but what are some of the ways that we can ensure the candidate experience remains strong with these AI processes still in place? Are there any kind of big overarching tips or ideas that you could share?
I'll just say, you know, I think was the same as before AI was introduced, which is follow up with people, right? Like I can't tell you how many candidates, even just, when let's say we fill a job and their resume maybe wasn't even reviewed, but we send out a note, at least letting them know, hey, we're sorry we didn't get to you, keep an eye on our hiring page. We've hired someone else, like, so many people responded to say, well, thank you for at least telling me. Like that just shows how above and beyond your company is, and that you really care. Also, some of the templates that I've used in previous companies really use very empathetic language. So, I know you're probably really disappointed to hear this, but we unfortunately are passing on your candidacy, right? Things like that go a really long way. Also, things like, especially if the person has progressed multiple rounds in the interview process, actually hopping on a call and letting them know they're not going to continue with the process, right? I think the candidates who invest a lot of time in an interview process, there's extra feelings and attachment, right? So treating them like humans, right? So yes, we do have to automate a lot, but I think there's little ways to infuse empathy and a human touch and that connection through the process.
I've heard from candidates who've said I've been on 5 interviews and the rejection email I got was the same email I could have gotten from the first interview. And
Yes.
obviously that doesn't feel good for anyone. And I would say the other thing we hear all the time from talent, especially in our virtual job fairs, is they're asking, it says, I've applied 3 times, I've never heard back once. And ultimately that person is going to go on social media and say, X company, you they just ghost you, don't even wind up applying to them, like, and that trickles down. So we always say, even if it's a very simple response and you do automate it at that first stage, let the person know, right? But Katie, any other thoughts from you in terms of keeping that human touch in this kind of automated world?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Krista. At all my jobs, we've always had a policy that once somebody really makes it past the second round, like you have to pick up the phone and give them a call. That's 100%. That's 100% for sure in terms of like removing. And we coordinate it that we make sure people are called before, because eventually, and I do tell people they're going to get the automated email because with the way our rec tracker, they're going to get the automated email, but at least they first get the call and knowing that, and that's fine, they're going to get the email, but they got the phone call. So that's always been the policy. I think it's a very good practice, like to do that. Um, yeah, I think that's a main. I think the other piece is, and look, there's two sides to every coin, right? And I certainly empathize with a job seeker because looking for a job is really hard. It's emotionally taxing. You have a relationship with your job and your employer, and it's you're and the stakes can be high, like, right, most of us are working because we need our jobs. That being said, there is, in terms of like the black hole and I got ghosted, the volumes probably always been high, but there has been a shift in the market because the volume of resumes I'm seeing across the board, even for I do executive search at Dow Jones, and for some of our executive search roles, the amount of resumes I'm seeing are three digits of numbers, which I have never. I did it at my executive search at my former employer as well, which was also a very large, big brand, and I have never in my life seen ex like resumes for GMs, SVPs in the hundreds. I've just never seen it, and I'm seeing it right now within the marketplace. So that gives you a sense for some of the mid-level jobs, manager and entry level. The volume of resumes is astronomical. So sometimes where it's like my resume black hole, it's that it's almost like you're waiting in, like waiting in a long line. Like you're just never going to get to the front of that line. And there's really just kind of no other way to put it on, unfortunately. But yeah, I think as much human. So I know for us, we try to do as much human point as we can, but there are certain points where there's just never, I hate to say never, like very, like such a big word, but like there just never is going to be a human touch sometimes with some of it. I think they're looking at job seekers just some level of understanding and acceptance of that as well.
I definitely think they do, and that's very interesting to hear about kind of the volume, and it's always good, I think, for the job seeker to hear that too, because then I think they are more understanding. And I love some of the other stuff in the chat here. Christy saying they've been utilizing Hire Guide for their interview tool. So thank you, Christy, for the shout out there. And I know, Krista, you were adding some other tools in there. Before we run out of time, I'd love to also talk about some of the ethics and compliance around AI. So maybe, Stephanie, maybe you can kick us off here. So, what ethical considerations should we discuss regarding candidates using AI tools? And also, I'd say, are there any tips for navigating compliance around using those tools?
I think transparency is the most important thing. Um, from us on us, and I've actually started to see this from other companies where they will have language in their job postings or emails that we may be using AI, and they actually give the candidates the ability to opt in, like we will use AI to review your application or such and such, or even things like we've talked about the recording, like note takers. That is another thing that people need to be able to opt in. It's really fascinating because I've been in the market for the past 2 years, kind of been in contracts, seeing companies go from no AI to yes AI, but navigating like a lot of permissions, navigating local and national and legal. Because I've worked for international companies, so it's like in Europe, it's a whole nother thing in terms of compliance. But I mean, I think transparency and also kind of keeping up to date to where things are in terms of legalities around it. Um, and also on the candidate side, I mean, if we're using AI tools, we should expect candidates to use the same thing. So I think, for the candidate side, we should expect them to be able to use it and not necessarily penalize people. I've seen people like, well, we have a bunch of essays on our application and don't use AI. And it's like, that's kind of ridiculous, especially if you're using it on your end. But also understanding why, okay, we want to hear people's actual thoughts and such, but it is a slippery slope, but again, just transparency, keeping up to date on, how to stay compliant in particular. And I think those are the most important things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think we may have lost Rob.
Uh-oh.
But one thing I'll
Yeah.
add to that, he may or may not come back on, with, oh goodness, I was going to talk about the opting in. Oh goodness, let me think about it. Katie, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think Stephanie's right. Like, I mean, it depends on your size company. Like when we were implementing some AI tools, like we have a legal and a compliance team, so I'm partnering very, very closely with them for their guidance, but certainly depends on your organization. I would also add it's AI is, it's almost like the dot-com in the early 2000s. It's such uncharted water, so it can be difficult to operate because um globally aside, that's a whole ball of wax. But within the United States, there's really no at this point. And look, there probably will be at some point, but there is no really federal laws around the usage of AI. Eventually, at some point, I'm sure we'll get there, like we did with internet usage and whatnot. But for now, most of it is state by state, in some cases city by city. So that can always, and I think that's why a lot of companies, generally speaking, have been cautious about spending money to implement and buy these tools because, like, from a compliance and legal perspective, there things will probably evolve in the next couple of years. So I think that's the other reason too, when people say, is AI reading my resume, it's like to a degree, but I think a lot of companies have been, yeah, holding back because to make these investments, which, and they are investments, and then have to make a switch or how you were going to use the tool. Maybe you can't use the tool the way you thought you could because the laws change, because we're still very, very early stages and the laws really can vary. Even in, the laws can really vary state by state and really, really city by city in some cases.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's
Another thing
why
I
I would.
wanted, oh,
Sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
One thing I wanted to mention is security is the other thing. And this is why I've been in places where they're just very slowly allowing people to use it because of security issues, especially with proprietary information going out there. In my current contract, we're not allowed to put specific things into like general AI. We can use like the company, the internal AI, but like if I'm using like ChatGPT or
Mhm.
there's certain things like I'm not allowed to use. And I've seen that like, even Grammarly is one of the tools. I know I've seen across the board a lot of companies being like, you cannot use Grammarly. I use it personally, but that is another big thing. Like kind of the security issues is another thing I think a lot of companies are navigating and kind of like ties into things.
Yeah, we certainly always suggest talk to your company and see what are their policies there. And certainly, I think there's some overarching things like let's not put sensitive data, even if it's not part of the policy, into ChatGPT because we don't know where that's ultimately all going or other generative AI. But at the same time, yes, I think we should all check in, and I think it's also a good idea to subscribe to newsletters, go and read the news, because like you were saying, Katie, this is changing all the time, right? So we need to make sure that we're staying up to date on what are the trends and then what is actually happening on a state level, a city level, and as you were saying, Stephanie, definitely a country level, because Europe is far in advanced of the United States in terms of some of these restrictions there. So thank you all so much. Well, 30 minutes flew by, and thank you all for the great comments in the chat. There's some really great thoughts here and tools that people are sharing as well. So everyone should definitely check that out. But I really want to give a big thanks to Krista, Katie, and Stephanie for lending all of your expertise for this 30 minutes here. We will be back here at Power to Fly with other B2B events like this one. So always check our calendar, powertofly.com. We've got events usually every day, every week at least. So check that out. And we'll share this recording in the coming week, unless you're watching the recording right now, in which we've already shared it. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next event.